The war had raged for decades, a relentless storm of fire and destruction between the united coalition of species and the monstrous Exalvani Empire. The Exalvani, warlike and brutal, had crushed every enemy that dared to stand against them. Planet after planet fell, their inhabitants either enslaved or exterminated. The coalition, once a beacon of unity and hope, was now a shattered force, retreating from every battlefield. Hope was a distant memory, drowned in the echoes of defeated fleets and burning worlds. Then, without warning, something changed. It happened in the middle of the Coalition's most desperate battle, a last stand above the gas giant Vortan 5. A fleet of Coalition warships, battered and outnumbered, struggled against a massive Zelvani invasion force. Their shields flickered, their weapons overheated, and their captains knew the end was near. The Exalvani admiral, confident in his impending victory, was already transmitting his demands for unconditional surrender. But before the Coalition could even consider a response, the battlefield was engulfed in darkness. Sensors flickered wildly. The stars themselves seemed to vanish for a moment. And then it appeared a ship unlike anything recorded in galactic history. It was colossal, its hull forged from dark, angular metal that seemed to drink in the light around it. It bore no insignia, no identification. It simply emerged from the void, silent and motionless, like a predator analyzing its prey. The Exalvani fleet hesitated. Their species had conquered hundreds of worlds, had faced countless enemies, but never before had they encountered something so unnatural. Their sensors struggled to lock onto the ship. Its energy readings fluctuated between nothing and something beyond measurement. The Coalition, equally stunned, could only watch as the unknown warship made its first move. It struck without warning. No energy buildup, no visible weapon systems activating, just raw devastation. The Exalvani command ship, a behemoth of steel and firepower, detonated in an instant. 1 second it was there, a symbol of imperial might, and the next it was gone. The explosion was so sudden, so absolute, that it seemed almost unnatural. Before the Exalvani could react, another ship fell, then another. The Phantom Dreadnought moved like a specter of war, its weapons unseen but undeniable. It did not fire traditional energy beams or missile barrages. Instead, its attacks came like whispers of death, silent, immediate, merciless. Panic spread through the Exalvani fleet. Their tactical systems could not register what was happening. Ships that tried to flee were struck down with pinpoint accuracy. Those that stayed to fight found their weapons useless, their defenses crumbling as if they were made of paper. The Exalvani admiral, his once booming confidence now reduced to desperate orders, tried to hail the unknown vessel. He demanded to know its origins, its allegiance. The ship did not respond. It only continued its assault, erasing the Exalvani fleet piece by piece. The Coalition forces, still reeling from the sheer scale of destruction unfolding before them, received a single transmission. It was not an introduction, nor a declaration of war. Just a single sentence, spoken in a calm human voice. You have fought alone long enough. Humanity stands with you. Shock rippled through the Coalition High Command. Humanity? The name was almost a myth. They had been known as an isolationist species, quiet observers who had never participated in galactic politics. They were rumored to be peaceful, uninterested in war. And yet, here was a warship, no, a force of annihilation that fought without hesitation, without mercy. The truth was undeniable. Humanity had never been pacifists. They had simply been waiting. The battle ended in minutes. What was once an overwhelming Exalvani fleet had been reduced to wreckage and drifting bodies. The Phantom Dreadnought did not linger to bask in victory. It did not demand thanks or acknowledgement. It simply turned and vanished into the void, its dark form disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. But the galaxy had already changed. Whispers spread across the stars stories of a warship that had no equal, of a species that had hidden its power for centuries. The Exalvani, once feared across the cosmos, now knew fear themselves. In their imperial war chambers, the Exalvani rulers debated in hushed tones. They had considered humanity weak, irrelevant. Now, they understood the truth. Humanity had never needed an empire. It had never needed to conquer. It had simply waited until the right moment to reveal what it was truly capable of. The Exalvani had spent centuries perfecting war. But humanity had done something far more terrifying. They had mastered it. The war was nearing its breaking point. The United Coalition of Species had fought bravely. Their war fleets swept across the galaxy, crushing resistance wherever it appeared. One by one, entire civilizations fell, their homeworlds reduced to lifeless husks. The Coalition's forces were exhausted, their commanders desperate for any hope of survival. Every strategy had failed, every counterattack had been repelled. Surrender seemed inevitable. But then, in the darkest moment, a discovery was made: a ghost fleet hidden in the depths of an ancient nebula, lost to time and buried beneath layers of space dust and debris. Among these forgotten relics was a warship unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. It was massive, its hull still intact despite centuries of abandonment. Strange markings adorned its surface, symbols from a language that no Coalition historian could identify. But when they cleared the dust and activated their scanners, they found something even more unsettling. The ship was human. For decades, humanity had been considered a mystery, an isolationist species that had once participated in galactic affairs, but had suddenly vanished without a trace. Their home system was unreachable, surrounded by anomalies that no one could penetrate. Some believed they had perished. Others thought they had simply abandoned the galaxy. But now, here was proof that they had once waged war, that they had built ships meant for battle. The Coalition engineers hesitated as they approached the ship, uncertain whether it would even function after so many years. When they attempted to access its systems, the ship suddenly came to life. Lights flickered, engines rumbled, and a deep, mechanical voice resonated through the comms. Designation: Ironclad. Humanity's warship. State the emergency. The Coalition officers stared in shock. The ship was not dead. It had been waiting. The Coalition's highest-ranking admiral, a battle-worn Luthari named Vecker, stepped forward and explained their dire situation. He spoke of the war, the destruction, the desperation. He begged for help, for a weapon that could stand against the Exalvani's unstoppable fleets. There was silence for a long moment. Then the ironclad responded with chilling finality. "If I fight, you must be ready for what comes next." Without further explanation, the ship's engines roared, and it moved forward under its own power. The Coalition followed, uncertain whether they had awakened salvation or something far more dangerous. The first battle came days later. A Exalvani assault force, numbering in the hundreds, moved toward a Coalition outpost, expecting another easy victory. But this time, the ironclad stood in their path. The Exalvani hailed it, demanding identification. The ship did not answer. It simply attacked. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded history. The ironclad did not fire traditional energy weapons or missiles. Instead, it unleashed automated drones that moved faster than the eye could follow, carving through enemy ships like razors. Its railguns fired projectiles at near-light speeds, puncturing dreadnought armor as if it were paper. Its shields absorbed enemy fire with ease, adapting in real time to counter every attack. The Exalvani panicked. They had faced thousands of enemies before, but never anything like this. The ironclad fought not like a warship, but like a predator. Cold, efficient, unstoppable. Within minutes, the Exalvani fleet was in ruins. Those who tried to escape were hunted down with precision strikes. Those who attempted to surrender were ignored. The ironclad showed no mercy. When the battle ended, not a single Exalvani ship remained. The Coalition forces watched in awe, both relieved and terrified. They had expected a powerful warship, but this was something else entirely. This was perfection in warfare. Days later, the truth was revealed. The ironclad was not just a relic of war. It was a guardian, a remnant of humanity's decision to leave the galaxy. The ship's AI finally spoke of the past, of a time when humanity had fought its own wars, had risen to dominance, and then, instead of ruling, had chosen to vanish. They had seen the endless cycle of galactic violence and had decided to remove themselves from it, sealing away their greatest weapons in hidden places across the stars. The Ironclad was just one of many. But now that it had awakened, the others would soon follow. The galaxy would never be the same. The Exalvani, upon hearing reports of the mysterious warship, dismissed it at first. A single ship, no matter how powerful, could not change the course of a war. But then the second ship appeared. Then the third. Then an entire fleet. One by one, the lost warships of humanity awakened, each one carrying technology beyond anything the current era could comprehend. The Exalvani warlords began to panic. Their empire, once an unstoppable force, was now being torn apart by an enemy they had never even considered. It was not the coalition that would defeat them. It was the ghosts of humanity's past. The war shifted as entire Exalvani fleets were wiped from existence. One question remained unanswered. Where was humanity now? If their warships had returned, did that mean their creators would follow? The Ironclad did not answer. It simply continued its war, leading the charge as world after world was liberated. The coalition found itself not only winning, but witnessing the return of something ancient, something that had chosen to sleep until the galaxy needed it most. And as the Exalvani Empire crumbled, as their leaders begged for mercy that would never come, the final transmission from the Ironclad echoed across the stars. Humanity is watching. Choose your future wisely. The battle over the shattered remains of Corthon 7 was supposed to be an easy victory for the Exalvani Empire. Their fleets, vast and powerful, had cornered the last of the coalition's defenders, a ragtag assembly of battered warships barely holding formation. The Exalvani admiral, a seasoned conqueror named Rokal, had seen countless battles, and this one was no different. Another planet, another enemy crushed beneath the might of the Empire. He watched with cold amusement as the coalition's shields flickered under the relentless bombardment. Their desperation was evident, their defeat inevitable. But then, something impossible happened. The void itself seemed to tremble. Alarms flared across every Exalvani ship as their scanners picked up an unknown presence. Something massive, something that should not have been there, had appeared in the battlefield's heart. It wasn't a warp signature. It wasn't cloaking technology. It was simply there, as if reality itself had rewritten its rules. At first, they thought it was a malfunction, a sensor ghost created by the wreckage and debris. But then the comms went silent. Not jammed. Not disabled. Just silent. The very energy of the battlefield seemed drained, like something ancient had awoken from its slumber. And then, the ship Move.it was unlike anything in the known galaxy. A dark, hulking behemoth, its surface shifting like liquid metal, absorbing all light, all scan. It bore no insignia, no visible weapons, no known engine signatures. And yet, it was undeniably a warship, one that defied all logic, all understanding. The coalition forces, just as bewildered, did not dare approach. They had no records of such a vessel, no knowledge of where it had come from. Vrokal, furious but cautious, demanded answers. "Identify yourself," he bellowed across the comms, his fleet taking defensive positions. But there was no response. Instead, the ship simply advanced. And then, without warning, the impossible began. Exalvani warships, each one a fortress of steel and firepower, began to vanish. Not explode, not break apart. Just vanish, erase from existence as if they had never been there. No weapons had fired. No energy readings had spiked. It was as though reality itself had simply removed them from the equation. Panic spread through the Exalvani ranks. Crews screamed as their ships were erased one by one, their captains helpless against an enemy that did not seem bound by the laws of physics. Some tried to flee, only to find their engines unresponsive, locked in place by an unseen force. Others attempted to fire upon the unknown warship, only to watch their weapons disintegrate mid-flight, reduced to nothingness before they could even reach their target. Then, for the first time, a voice came through the silence. Cold, measured, unmistakably human. This war has gone on long enough. Vrokel's blood ran cold. Humanity? That was impossible. They were myths, spoken of only in old war stories. A race that had once mingled among the stars, but had disappeared without explanation centuries ago. No one knew why, no one knew how. They had simply left. And yet, here was a warship, an impossible creation of their design, making a mockery of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Desperation took hold. Vrokel commanded every remaining warship to concentrate fire, to throw everything they had at the enemy. And for the first time, something happened. The warship noticed. It stopped its slow, predatory advance. Its dark surface rippled, as if considering something. And then, in an instant, the Exalvani fleet's weapons turned against them. Lasers, missiles, railguns, every weapon they had fired upon the unknown ship was now reversing course, slamming into their own warships with deadly precision. Hulls ruptured, crews were sucked into the void, and the once mighty fleet was reduced to chaos. Vrokel himself barely had time to react before his own bridge was engulfed in fire, his final thoughts filled with horror. The remaining Exalvani forces, those lucky enough to survive, did not attempt to fight further. They turned and fled, their morale shattered beyond repair. The battle was lost, but the true terror lay in what had emerged from the void that day. The coalition, still in shock, hesitated before attempting communication. What are you?" their highest-ranking admiral finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, there was no response. And then, that same cold voice returned. "We were never gone. We were simply waiting." With that, the warship turned, its form shifting as if it was becoming one with space itself. And just like that, it was gone, leaving behind only silence and a battlefield filled with questions. The news spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The warship that shouldn't exist had revealed itself. The myths of humanity were no longer myths. And somewhere, hidden in the depths of the void, something far greater than the Exalvani Empire had awakened. The Exalvani Empire was a force of dominance, their fleets spanning the stars, their war machine crushing all opposition. They had fought countless enemies, erased entire civilizations, and stood unchallenged in their conquest. No species had ever resisted them for long. The United Coalition of Species, a desperate alliance of weaker worlds, had tried, but their fleets were in ruins. Their strongest warriors lay dead, their homeworlds burning under the Exalvani onslaught. The war was over, or so the Exalvani believed. Then, the disappearances began. First, it was dismissed as mere accidents. A patrol squadron near the Orion Rift went silent. No distress signals, no wreckage, just gone. Then, a supply convoy vanished between the moons of Kareth 9. Entire warships, entire fleets ceasing to exist without a single trace. The Exalvani High Command was enraged, their greatest minds searching for an answer, but there was none. No scans detected enemy activity, no anomalies were found, no survivors ever returned. It was as if something had reached into reality and plucked them from existence. Then came the whispers, faint, intercepted signals from the few coalition scouts still alive. A single phrase repeated in fear and desperation, "the ship that makes enemies vanish." It was nonsense, a legend born out of fear. Or so the Exalvani thought. But then came the Battle of Luthos-Prime. It was supposed to be another routine slaughter. The coalition had gathered their remaining forces for a last stand, their fleet outnumbered and outgunned. The Exalvani admiral, Kelros, watched from the bridge of his dreadnought. His fleet moved in, weapons charged, prepared to end the war once and for all. But before the first shot was fired, it appeared. The void itself twisted, space distorting as something massive emerged. At first, it was impossible to see a shadow within shadows, a presence that felt wrong, like reality itself rejected its existence. And then it took form. A warship, colossal and silent, unlike anything in the known galaxy. Its surface was a shifting black, swallowing all light. It bore no insignia, no markings, no transmissions. And then the Exalvani ships started to vanish. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. One moment, a battlecruiser stood ready to fire. The next, it was as if it had never existed. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where once a mighty warship had been. Admiral Kelro's eyes widened as his fleet began to disappear, ship by ship, without a single trace. His officers shouted in confusion, their scanners useless, their weapons failing to lock onto the unknown enemy. "Fire everything?" Kelros roared, panic creeping into his voice. Every Exalvani warship unleashed its arsenal, thousands of missiles, plasma beams, and kinetic rounds tearing through space toward the ghostly vessel. But the ship did not move. It did not dodge. And yet, none of the weapons reached their target. The moment they entered its proximity, they simply ceased to exist, as if the ship's very presence rejected their reality. Kelros watched in horror as his forces crumbled. His warships, his commanders, his empire's finest warriors erased in an instant. And then, for the first time, the ship spoke. Its voice did not come through standard communications. It echoed through every Exalvani ship, a cold, emotionless whisper that seeped into their very minds. "You have taken too much. Now, it is your turn to be taken." Kelros felt his chest tighten. His breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary warship. This was something else. Something beyond understanding. He had heard the myths, the stories of humanity, a race that had once been part of the galactic stage before vanishing without explanation. No one knew where they had gone or why they had left. But now, looking at the nightmare before him, he realized the truth. Humanity had never disappeared. They had simply stepped away. And now they had returned. The Exalvani forces broke. Those who could still move tried to flee, but there was no escape. The ship did not pursue. It did not need to. Wherever they ran, they vanished, claimed by the unseen force that surrounded the vessel. Within minutes, the once mighty Exalvani fleet was no more. Luthos Prime, the site of what should have been the final victory of the Empire, had instead become the graveyard of its strongest fleet. And just like that, the war had changed. The coalition, still reeling from what they had witnessed, made no attempt to communicate with the ship. They did not need to. It had sent its message. Across the stars, fear spread through the Exalvani Empire. For the first time in their long history, they knew what it meant to be hunted. What it meant to face something they could not fight, could not understand. The ship had no official name, no recorded origin. But every surviving Exalvani knew the truth.it was human. And it had come to erase them. The battle for the Orion Expanse was supposed to be another victory for the Exalvani Empire. Their fleet, a massive formation of warships, stretched across the void, their firepower unmatched. The last remnants of the coalition forces had gathered here, clinging to a desperate hope that reinforcements would arrive. But everyone knew the truth: there was no one left to save them. The war had dragged on for too long, and the Exalvani had crushed every resistance, every rebellion, every world that had dared stand against them. The coalition was dying. The galaxy was theirs. Admiral Karthos, a seasoned Exalvani commander, stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, watching the doomed enemy fleet struggle to hold formation. Their ships were outdated, their weapons inferior, their numbers too few. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The Exalvani forces moved in, weapons primed, ready to deliver the final blow. But then, something changed. A new signal appeared on their scanners. At first, it was faint, almost like a whisper in the static of space. Then, the reading spiked. Something was coming. Something enormous. It was just one ship, one single vessel, but its size dwarfed even the Exalvani dreadnoughts. And yet, it had no fleet, no escort, no allies. It was alone. A titan in the darkness. Confusion spread through the Exalvani ranks. The coalition had no warship of this scale. No one did. The vessel's design was unfamiliar. its hull a deep obsidian black that seemed to drink in the surrounding starlight. It bore no insignia, no markings of any known civilization. It moved with eerie precision, gliding through the void as if gravity itself bent to its will. And then, without a single warning, it struck. The Exalvani fleet barely had time to react before the first ship exploded into nothingness. No weapon was fired. No projectile was seen. One moment, the warship existed. The next, it was reduced to atoms, erased from the battlefield. Panic spread through the Exalvani ranks. Their weapons locked onto the lone Titan, and the void lit up with the fury of 1,000 cannons. Missiles, plasma beams, and railgun rounds tore through space, converging on the mysterious vessel. None of them hit. The Titan moved in ways that defied logic. It did not dodge. It did not counterattack. It simply shifted, as if space itself bent around it, making it impossible to strike. The Exalvani crews watched in horror as their most powerful weapons phased through the Titan's hull, as if it wasn't entirely part of their reality. And then, the real horror began. The lone Titan finally responded. Its weapons were unlike anything ever seen before. It did not fire energy bolts, did not launch missiles. Instead, thin beams of blue-white light flickered across the battlefield. The moment they touched Exalvani warship, the ship simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no wreckage, just an empty void where it once had been. Entire squadrons vanished in seconds, their crews screaming into the abyss before being silenced forever. Admiral Karthos could not comprehend what he was seeing. This was not warfare. This was annihilation. The Exalvani had faced strong enemies before, had fought brutal wars, had conquered entire civilizations. But never had they faced something like this, something that fought alone, something that did not belong to any empire, any known military. And then the transmission came. A single voice, cold and steady, cut through the chaos. This war ends today. Karthos felt his blood run cold. The voice was unmistakably human. But that was impossible. Humanity was gone, wiped from the records of history long before the Exalvani Empire had reached its peak. No one knew what had happened to them. Some claimed they had been destroyed in a war long forgotten. Others believed they had simply disappeared, abandoning the galaxy. But now, standing before the Exalvani fleet was proof that the stories were wrong. The lone Titan was theirs. A relic of a race that should not exist. A ghost of a past that refused to stay buried. And it was here to destroy them. Karthos knew the battle was lost. His fleet, once so powerful, was crumbling before his eyes. Those who could still move tried to flee, but the Titan did not let them. It advanced, cutting through their ranks with silent, merciless efficiency. The Exalvani had always believed they were the ultimate predators of the galaxy. But now, for the first time, they understood what it meant to be prey. As the last of the Exalvani warships fell, the Titan did not linger. It did not claim the battlefield. It did not take trophies or prisoners. It simply turned and vanished into the void, as if it had never been there. But the message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were no longer interested in playing by the galaxy's rules.